today's episode of the Exposed Negative podcast, myself and Greg, we sit down with Rafael Orta, the CEO of Capture One. I'm sure it's going to be a great chat, so let's just get straight into it. And Rafael, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's really great to be here with you today.
Well, thanks very much for taking the time to come on. We appreciate it. I think we should probably say, full disclosure, that we've already met, haven't we? So we have now had, over the past couple of weeks, a lot of dialogue about Capture One, and that's how you came on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'm incredibly grateful for all the time that you and Tom and Greg have given me, and the rest of the team at Capture One. Like, we've spent a lot of time talking to professional photographers and the folks that work with professional photographers in the last year. And it's been super insightful and super helpful for us to, think about the future of Capture One. So thanks a lot for having me here, and also thanks a lot for the time.
No, I mean, here's the thing. We are most happy to do it. Whatever we can do to help you makes our life better in the long run. So it's very much like just a little investment of our time. Hopefully will pay dividends. So it's all good. But quickly, before we get into all of that, do you want to just give anyone who doesn't know or doesn't use Capture One, do you want to just give them a brief overview of what Capture One is?
Yeah.
Or do you want to start by introducing yourself a little bit?
Why don't we do that? I love talking about myself.
There we go. All right, let's start with that, and then we'll move into what Capture One is.
Perfect. So I'm the CEO of Capture One. I've been with the company for just under 3 years, and I'm a computer scientist by profession. But the reality is that technology is as close to a calling as anything will ever be in my life. Like, I'm one of those people who got interested in technology at a super young age. And then that's been the through line in everything that I've done in my life and my career as well. I spent quite a long time working in e-commerce. I spent 10 years at eBay and a couple of years at Tesco. And I also had stints in fintech on one side of that, but also on FMCG and logistics, the other side of that. So I've had quite a varied career, and like the golden thread in there has always been technology. So one of the really important things as we step into this is to say that I'm not a photography insider, but I am a technology insider. And one of the things that I really love to do is to learn about new industries and learn about how technology can help, and how it can help those industries progress and push the boundaries of what they do. And in case people are wondering, I'm from Venezuela. I left Venezuela in 2003. At the time I was married and I had one child. And since then, me and my family, we have lived in 5 countries. I had another 2 kids along the way. We adopted a dog. So each one of the kids and the dog are from a different country. And so for me, coming to Capture One to lead the company was as much a new professional adventure, a new chapter in my career, as much as it was a new family adventure. Denmark is an incredible country where to be, where to live, and where to build a business from.
Very good, very good.
And then in terms of Capture One, so it's actually a very, very cool time to talk about Capture One, because just a couple of weeks ago, we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the release of Capture One. And the exact birth date of Capture One is a little bit unknown. But in any event, in the late 90s, Phase One, who had been building software for Phase One cameras, started to expand the scope of what Capture One could do so that it could connect to cameras from other brand manufacturers. And effectively what Capture One did is that it guided the transition of commercial photography from film onto digital. It made it viable. And it's for a couple of reasons. The first one is, number one, the quality with which it handles the images. So, as the raw files come in and as they're displayed, it's just beautiful rendering of those files, of those colors. Secondly, because of the stability of the connectivity, so our understanding of how to connect a camera with a device, and in the past it used to be computers, MacBooks, and Windows PCs. But lately, we've also transitioned to include iOS devices like iPads and iPhones. And the reliability of the connectivity is always the same. And the really important thing that does is that it allows photography teams to work very, very efficiently together. And those are the things that we really care about. We care about the quality of the imaging. We care about the quality of the interaction between different members of the team. And we care about speed and efficiency because the majority of our customers are folks who work towards a deadline. And the other side of the deadline, there's a client, and there's a very demanding client with requirements. So we spend a lot of time thinking about how can we help people that operate within that environment to do it in the best way possible, while at the same time protecting the integrity of the quality of their work and manifesting the creative vision that they have. So when we talk about Capture One, or when I talk about Capture One, I always say it is photography software for professionals, and it's something that is greatly more expansive than just editing or just tethering or just collaboration. It's an end-to-end workflow that allows a professional to conduct their work in the way that they want, but also in an incredibly efficient way, so that they can reach, they can get from shoot to final image really, really quickly and really efficiently.
And we do. I mean, that's the nice thing about using this software is I think me personally, I know Greg has dipped in and out of Capture One, but for me personally, I have lived in Capture One now for years. I mean, I started using it. I think when we were chatting the other day, I think I came on at like version 8 or 9. Wow. It was pretty early days. It might have even been earlier. I might have been even on version 6. Whatever the first version was that was allowing Canon cameras to be used in it, that was the first version I came into, because I think in the early days of my career, when I had seen kind of shoots happening with the big guys, with the the phases, the Hasselblads, not the Hasselblads obviously, but the Hasselblads with the phase backs, and all that sort of stuff. Me being also obsessed with tech, I'd be like, well, what are they using? Like what are the guys at the top of the game using to capture their images? And whenever you'd see the laptop or anything like that, it was always Capture One. And so as soon as I was aware that it was working on Canons at the time, I was just like, right, I have to use that. If that's what the top guys are using, there's going to be a reason for it.
Yeah.
And so I think it'd be great to explain why we all use it. Right, you've talked about the image quality, you've talked about the connectivity things, and it's honestly, it's a very, very rock solid bit of software. I know that as with any bit of software, sometimes we have moments and it has hiccups, but the Digitex, the guys I work with, and me, we tend to know how to kind of fix those problems, and often they're fixed by just a restart. So for me, the big advantages of Capture One are it's just absolutely rock solid tethering, and like you say, the image quality, the way to deal with color. I mean, I love the software. I'm a big fan. So it's
and look, we hugely appreciate that, and one of the features of Capture One, because one of the parts of the story that I omitted is that 4 years ago, the company was spun out of Phase One. So, for the majority of the history of Capture One, it was a software division inside of Phase One, the camera manufacturer. Right. And just over 4 years ago, it was spun out as a standalone, as an independent company. And one of the things that has allowed us to do is to invest in the software in such ways that we can make it more resilient. We can optimize the code base so it's much more efficient, and we can also work on eliminate bugs. Like I've had a whole career in software, and bugs are an integral part of software development. Mm-hmm. The real question is, and this is the really important thing for me, is how does a software company establish relationships with their customers in such a way that we can really understand when the work that we do is when there are things that can be improved in the work that we do, and then how do we bring that back into the software, and then how do we respond to that as quickly and as effectively as possible.
Right. So it's interesting you bring that up. So I think we should just address the elephant in the room. We should just get straight to it. Obviously, let's talk about the export tab. Right, because mm-hmm. I believe this would have been there's a couple of things that I want to grill you a little bit, but me and you, we've already discussed this, so there's not going to be any shock horror. There's no gotcha moments or anything like that. But the export tab, that must have been a bit of a wake up for you guys, and going
exactly 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly right. Wow. And so, what to the day? to the day we were recording this?
Oh, I think you know, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a whole one of the Digitech Instagram accounts. They created a whole series of posts about this, and you know, we should. I can look that up afterwards and send you links if you want to put them in the show notes.
Let me tell you,
it is. I think it's almost to the day 2 years ago.
You say, "Do I remember?" Raphael, we remember.
Of course.
No, I mean, here's the thing, right? To err is human. Everyone makes mistakes, and I think we touched on it when we had chatted previously. That you had said that there was an attitude within Capture One that you were kind of like rebels a little bit. You'd just be like, right, well, this is what we're going to do because this is what we do, right? And so you would just kind of like steam ahead with a bit of an idea, and then with the export being removed, I believe the intention was good. I believe the intention is to make it a bit more accessible to kind of users maybe coming over from other bits of software.
I think we should
to kind of make it maybe slightly more.
Sorry, Tom. I think very quickly we need to explain to the listeners who don't know what you're talking about what actually happened in terms of the export tab, what was taken away, and what.
Right.
Because there will be listeners that aren't Capture One users. So the reason that this is such a interesting area to talk about is the fact that you guys actually took on the feedback that came back to you and made changes, which for a software company is quite rare. For a software company that's as high end as somebody like Capture One. But should we go back to what actually took place?
Of course. Right. So about 2 years ago to the day, the export tab was removed from an update in Capture One. Now, the export tab, for those who don't use it or those who don't maybe use Capture One or have not been really kind of using it so much, the export tab allows you to create. It's, I would say, probably one of the most useful parts of Capture One, and one of the things that really helps it stand out for me against all the other software, is you are able to create recipes. And the recipes are able to, you're able to create all of them out with variables. So you can kind of put in folder name, and you can put pretty much any variable to do with the files or the folders within the process recipes. So Digitex and us on when we're on shoots, we're able to process out vast numbers of beautifully organized images at the correct resolution in the correct color space. It's a really, really great thing. And so when it was removed, the professional photography and Digitech community was basically up in arms, because it felt as if Capture One just didn't know the audience. And we suddenly, I think it was not just the export tab. I think it basically brought in a lot of doubt and worry about the general direction of Capture One. So obviously we all complained. You guys were probably inundated, I would imagine, with complaints and kind of angry people going, I need that back. And like Greg says, you guys went, yep, all right, we put our hands up. That was a mistake. It's now back. So, and we, thank you very much for putting it back. We appreciate it. I want to quickly say, before we get too far into it, having had chats with you, and I know Greg, obviously, I set a few others up as well, I feel very much reassured by you, but I'd like to go into that later on, if that's okay.
Yeah.
But I do just kind of want to say, there's a couple of elephants that we kind of need to address. I think the export one is going to be the big one, because that must have been a bit of an eye opener for you guys.
Yeah. So look, the way I think, and look, I've had 2 years to think about this, right? So the way I think about this is, my job in this company is threefold. So the first one is, this company was spun out of another company, and when it came out, on the whole, it was the engineering team what came out. So part of my project here has been building the rest of the company around that. A little bit earlier on, off recording, we were talking about the accounting team and the legal team who's at the other side of where I am right now. So all of these folks came in after the separation. Mm-hmm. Then there's a second piece, which is building Capture One, the product. So the software, the tool that photographers and digitechs and assistants use on a daily basis on sets and on location, etc. And then the third thing is finding a path for Capture One to be successful as a company in the long term. So we just turned 25 years, and my hope and my expectation is that 25 years from today, I'll hopefully be retired by then, but I can come back to Copenhagen and there will be a reunion, and I will reminisce with a few faults, maybe including the two of you, about all of the great things about building Capture One and what Capture One is up to at the time. And this event was indeed incredibly important for us as a company, because one of the things that it really helped us do was to sharpen our strategic focus, to really go and pursue and understand who are our target customers and what are the needs that they have, and then how do we back that into our software development cycles. And what it did is that it opened the door for me to go and speak to folks like George Brooks, and to go and speak to folks like Brian Feeney, who he wrote this public letter to Capture One, which in very direct, very clear ways, he communicated his point of view. And these are people who are respected in the industry, who are influential in the industry. And it gave me a pathway to go and have those conversations to really understand how can we help the industry better. Because ultimately, like you and I, like we have been exchanging messages about, scheduling and how busy you all are. And look, candidly and openly, like one of the things that gives me great pleasure is when someone tells me, look, I am super busy right now. And one of our customers, a photographer or a digitech, says, look, I am super busy. We're going to have to meet, in an evening, or maybe we can go and have breakfast. Or, but either way, like the role that we play is trying to make sure that we help our customers, photographers, digitechs, etc., be successful in their careers. So this really opened a door for us, and in a big way, it's a significant part of how we think about software, which is also, just to say this out loud, different from how you think about hardware development, which is, hardware development are very long cycles. And then once you've started manufacturing and shipping hardware, you can't really roll back. But with software, it is different. With software, you can form a point of view and move in a certain direction, and then you can learn something really important the way how we learned it. And then we can say, okay, like this was not the right solution, but we can ship an update, we can ship a new version, and we can create options. Because also one of the things that we have right now is that there's optionality in Capture One in the way how you use it. And that's a really important part of our design philosophy. Our design philosophy ultimately puts control in the hands of the user. Capture One is a very, very rich, very deep application, but it doesn't impose a certain workflow on our customers. It actually, by design, what it does is that it gives the photographer the flexibility to shape their workflow in the way that they think is best for them.
Yeah, because there's always there's a couple of ways of doing things, isn't there? There's always, if you want to adjust the exposure, there's, I think, 4 or 5 different ways of doing it. And it's, everyone can then create. And I think this is one of the things that I enjoy about Capture One so much, is that you create your own way of working within it. Yes, you've got all the same tools as everyone else, but there's ways of tweaking things, and there's way of doing that. And, the Luma curve versus the RGB curve. And then you've got obviously the levels, and then you've got the RGB levels as well. There's always so many different ways of killing the same bird with about 5 stones. It might not be the right metaphor, but there's always ways of multiple ways of doing things. Horrible, yes. Sorry, it's definitely not the right metaphor, but you know what I mean. It's so flexible, and it's for someone like me with the brain that I have, being able to kind of solve a problem multiple ways is very relaxing in a way. Because also I love that there's the exposure tool and the brightness tool. Now, for people who don't understand the difference, and please correct me if I get this wrong, the exposure tool is basically, it will bring every single pixel up in that image by however much you adjust it. Whereas you go down a couple of those, so you drop down from contrast down to the brightness tool. Now, the brightness tool will only increase a certain tonal range, and it will not brighten the brightest highlights. I'm
sure you're right, Tom.
No, but it's great. There's multiple ways of doing everything, and I think that's one of the things that, for me personally, makes Capture One such a great bit of software.
Yeah. And look, one of the things that we recognize is that, even an individual photographer might have different modes of working. So sometimes you might be in a huge set, huge operation, huge team. Sometimes you might be going solo. So the tool has to adapt to that range of different workflows. But then also you have like the very different needs. You have the e-commerce studio photography where you have this need, this demand for productivity. And then on the other hand, you might have the landscape photographer who's working on a completely different pace and a completely different cadence, and like the photography takes place, and then the processing will take place. It's something that is done in batches, as opposed to this real-time feeling that you have when you walk into an e-commerce studio photography. And that flexibility, what it allows us is to cover all of those surfaces and to give the great benefits of using Capture One to many different disciplines, sometimes different disciplines with exactly the same photographer, because photographers can also be quite versatile in terms of the different disciplines that they touch.
Of course. I mean, that has got to be a really, really difficult thing about having a software for such a varied industry. You say that you've got landscape guys there. Now, landscape guys, I don't know how many of them tether, probably not very many. But then you come over to the e-com stuff. So you've gone from having kind of, minutes of exposure and a really planned out shot to then suddenly the e-com stuff where you might be doing thousands of images an hour. And so you've got to then create a bit of software that works across every single type of workflow. Now, that's obviously got to present some challenges, right?
So mainly it is, how do we really understand, what is the underlying need that all of these customers have? And so we always start with, number one, we're uncompromising about image quality. So the thing that we will always go back to is the raw file, the way how we understand how the sensor works, the way how we represent the colors. We keep iterating on those, and we keep chipping away at those. And we have great relationships with manufacturers. Some relationships are far deeper than others. But the reason for that is trying to make sure that whatever hits the sensor, that it looks in the way it looks like it has our point of view on it. So that's number one. And we start from the perspective of no photographer ever said, I wish that the quality of the image was a little bit worse, right? So we can always move the boundaries a little bit forward on that. The second piece is reliability and speed. And this is something that, particularly in the last few years, working, one of the big advantages that has presented to us in the last few years has been the development of the Apple chipset. Because to begin with, it's an incredible architecture, and then they have used the architecture across multiple different families of devices, which has allowed us to optimize our code for those devices, and it means that it's incredibly performant, it's incredibly stable, and it doesn't matter if you're in a fast in a fast turn environment like an e-commerce studio, or if you're coming back to your studio with hundreds of images from a landscape photo shoot. You want your software to be performant and stable, because one of the things is many of these landscape photographers are still operating against the deadline, or are still operating with a client the other side of that. And then the final piece is there's always work in teams. At a minimum, the smallest team will be the photographer and their client. And then there might be more people around that. If a bigger project, there might be an art director and a stylist and models, and there will be many multiple channels that will be the recipients of this photography. It could be out of home advertising, it could be social channels, it could be e-commerce channels. So how do we providing the tools to enable that collaboration and to have teams come together, and particularly at a time when teams don't have to come together physically, but they can work together and they can collaborate effectively without necessarily being in the same room. So that's the level at which we pitch our solutions. It's look, what are the broadest problems that are general to these photographers, and then how do we give photographers control over how they use the tool, which is where our design philosophy around, you as a customer, you as a user of the tool, you are able to customize and to create a workspace that is the best workspace for you in this moment for this particular task that you're trying to accomplish.
So one of the things, this is Greg's question, but we had a bit of a technical glitch, so Greg will join us again. The question I would like to kind of just say is, how are you reaching out to those photographers? How are you getting those opinions back? Obviously you've said, earlier on that you're listening to people and you're kind of gathering feedback. How is it that you're doing that?
So I will start with the following, which is, it's deeply, deeply ingrained in the DNA of the company. And Capture One is a company of 160 people.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what that means is that we can give great exposure to everyone in the company to the needs and the world and the vision that photographers have for their work and their process and their workflow. And we do it in a huge diversity of ways. So it of course starts with, I spend some amount of time traveling, and I spend some amount of time speaking to folks like you and going to studios and speaking to Digitex. And so that's kind of like the most, let's say, intimate, like one-to-one version of that. And then the broadest version of that is that every month we get the whole of the company together for what we call a town hall. And at every town hall, it's a mandate that we have, which is at every town hall, we interview a photographer. So we spend about an hour talking about things that are internal to the company. And then we spend about 30 minutes where there's a live interview with the photographer. And, like it happens on Teams. So there's live questions that go to the photographer. And also there will be some pre-prepared questions, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And then in between those two extremes, there's a number of things that happen. So firstly, we're, of course, incredibly tuned into social media and incredibly tuned into our forums and incredibly tuned into the improved Capture One requests on our website. And our product team, the way how their process works is that it works through constantly interviewing customers and learning about the needs that they have and how can we improve Capture One. And this is an evergreen process. This happens all of the time. Every week there will be product managers who are interviewing 1, 2, 3 photographers. And some of the teams even have targets. They will say, this quarter I will have at a minimum 10 interviews with photographers within these parameters. It might be a certain discipline, or it might be a certain tool or a certain feature that we're building.
Right.
And then the final thing that I wanted to throw into that is that, of course, that we have become far more open about the way how we build software, precisely because in being a pure software company, our software cycles are very, very different to when we were attached to annual releases and camera releases, etc. So what that means is that we can release features that are in beta, and our customers will start using them, and as a result of that, we start to learn about what things can we improve. We also have a beta program for everything. We release the iPhone app in beta. We also release the iPad app that way, and we do it regularly as well with with Capture One Pro. So there's a huge number of ways, but the core of it is that it runs right through our DNA. And I'll just wrap it up by saying that the thing that is, because like this shouldn't be left unsaid, is that Capture One attracts people that care passionately about photography, and that might have in their profession they might have landed on a different pathway, but somewhere along the line photography was a significant part of their life. So we have a number of employees, colleagues here at Capture One who were professional photographers at some points in their careers. They might have been wedding photographers, or they might have worked in commercial environments. And maybe, for different reasons, their career pathway led them in the direction of Capture One. But in any event, like it is an integral part to who we are. So particularly in product and technology, about 30% of our team are photographers by one description or another. And like at the top end of that, you will have people that have earned income from photography. And then at the other end of that, you will have people that are enthusiast photographers, but that are incredible in the craft.
Right.
So it runs very, very deep inside it. Like photography is something that we take incredibly seriously. And, if you visit Capture One HQ, and I hope that we can host you sometime, you would see that, we run photography competitions. There's cameras everywhere. You see people walking around with color cards. Like it is something that is absolutely integral to what we do. Because to be clear, like we're a company of 160 people who are purely focused on one thing, which is how do we help photographers accomplish their workflow better, to get from shoot to final image better, and that's the only thing that we do.
See, that's nice, isn't it? I like that. I like that a lot. But listen, can we talk about the tools, right? So let's talk about not the tools, but let's talk about the various versions of the apps, because I know there'll be some people listening who are a bit worried that there has been an iPhone app released, for example. But having chatted to you, I now kind of understand it. So can we talk about the iPad app? Because I use it. I think it's great. I am aware that we are using a very early version of it, and it's only going to get better and more powerful. So I'm not necessarily worried. I've met with your product lead on the iPad. We spent an hour or so on Zoom. I ran her through everything, and going back to you listening to people, over the past month or so, Capture One have spoken to me for 2, 3, 4 hours. And we have, it really feels like you guys actually really are listening. And I've from my point of view, that is incredibly reassuring. I've got a list that I've been so busy I haven't had a chance to send it to you, but you really are asking, you're chasing me for this list. And I'm like, okay, great. I mean, obviously that's fantastic from my point of view. But quickly, before we go into that, let's talk about the iPad and the iPhone version. The iPad, to me, makes perfect sense. You mentioned earlier that there might be solo shooters and stuff like that. Well, I tether all the time. I'm a solo shooter on my personal work, for example. And so I have the iPad in an Armor X case and a Peak Design strap that I sling over my shoulder, and I run straight from the camera on another strap straight into the iPad. And it's been brilliant. I shot a personal project the other day, and we walked around a festival, and I shot 15 people, and it was amazing to just flip between Capture One into my release program. So I literally just would go straight from Capture One. So having shot the images and showed them, and people go, wow, that's lovely. And then we go into the paperwork side of things. And I'm now able to do everything for my personal work on one device, on my own.
That's incredible.
Just have it slung over my shoulder. Honestly, it's amazing. I do wish the iPad was slightly brighter. But that's my problem. That's my beef with Apple.
Yeah. Rumors are they're doing a big upgrade next year. So
I'm holding. I was going to go and buy another one, but I've decided to hold off till next year, because by the looks of it, next year might be the year of the iPad, with about 3 or 4 different models getting released. Because some of them, especially the Mini, for example, has been over 2 years since it's been updated. So I'm sure it'll all happen. Plus, also, I think there's going to be. I think most of them are USB-C now. Actually, are there any that are?
Yes.
Lightning?
Yes, that's right.
They're all USB-C.
Yeah.
There we go. But that's obviously amazing for you guys. The introduction of USB-C to the iPad was probably one of the big factors that enabled Capture One to go, well, actually, that might be a viable option for us to now use Capture One on the iPad. So can you kind of run us through? Is that basically how these products kind of started?
So to zoom back a little bit to give you some of the history here. So when I joined Capture One was a Mac OS and Windows application. and incredibly powerful applications, and with huge use across the industry and also outside of industry.
Mm-hmm.
But as someone who came from technology, one of the observations that I had was in technology in general, you have these huge transformational waves that happen from time to time. And like I was talking earlier about my experience in e-commerce, and I started in e-commerce before mobile commerce was a thing. That's how old I am. And I lived through that process of like, the phone is going to become a shopping device, and shopping is going to become a multi-device experience. And I also lived through the transition to cloud, and how cloud allows consumers to work in very, very different ways, and then how that led to a revolution in what we call now AI, which is basically a revolution in data availability and our ability to use that data to create experiences. So one of the things that we do as a technology company is that we have to ask ourselves the question, given the needs that our customer have, and given the technologies that are being made available to us, then how do we translate this into utility for customers? And some of these things are very, very immediate. So some of these things you can very quickly see that something like Capture One Live, where we have connected a cloud application straight into the Capture One image pipeline, and how that enables collaboration, and how it enables a completely new experience, and even the experience that you have with the iPad. And then some of these things are a little bit longer term. So, our observation about iPhone, and, as we started to step into iPhone, one of the things that we knew was, it sounds like USB-C and the change in transfer speeds is something that is in the future of iPhone. And, we're only maybe a week away from knowing whether that is true or not. And then the other thing, which is also very real for the iPhone, is that, like Apple are, as I think we all know, are an incredibly secretive company, but at the same time, they're very open about the vision that they have for the future, and they have positioned the iPhone as a capture device, and like they keep investing incredibly into the camera system of the iPhone, both the optics and the sensor, and also the computational capabilities behind that. So for us, the iPhone is also something that, on the one hand, we think it has immediate utility in the sense that it's an incredibly portable device, and you can create an end-to-end Capture One workflow around an iPhone. But we also see how if the iPhone continues to unfold in the way how it's kind of like the general estimation that it will continue to unfold, which is better connectivity, more computing power, better imaging. We think it will be an incredibly relevant device for, and also just like the fact that it's always connected. Then we think it is an incredibly relevant device to the photography workflow, because it also allows us to combine the incredible optics and sensors that ILC cameras have, mirrorless cameras, and like the wonderful thing that they have, and the wonderful thing that these manufacturers do is, these incredible optics and incredible sensors. And then, for us, one of the questions that we constantly ask ourselves is, in an environment where you have, where you need flexibility, and when you might have multiple people around that workflow, then how do you make it possible for multiple people to have access to that? And we believe that iPhone plays a significant role in there. So that's kind of like our product vision. Our product vision is giving photographers all of these tools across multiple devices in such a way that Capture One becomes the most powerful creative and collaboration tool at their disposal. And some of it is firmly established, in the form of Capture One Pro. Some of it is in development in the form of our iPhone app, and other things are somewhere in between those two. But as a software company, and as someone who leads a software company, like one of the things that I do, and then also I said earlier, look, like this is really my calling in life, is understanding the technology landscape and then making choices. And sometimes these choices, they genuinely feel like a bet. As in, like, we're going to make a bet on that this technology will unfold this way, and that will be an incredibly useful tool for the photographers of the future. And then that takes me around to my very, very final point about all of this, which is the most significant business imperative for Capture One is to attract photographers to use Capture One far earlier in their careers. So the number of times that I've heard a photographer tell me, I wish I had discovered Capture One 5 years earlier. Or the number of times that I've heard a successful photographer tell me this story about one day walking into a studio and then someone pointing them at the computer and saying Capture One is there, and then them pulling out their phone and saying, what is Capture One? And like looking up on YouTube, like, how do I use this thing? And then it almost felt like they walked into Narnia, as in like they opened this door and it's like, oh, I was transported into a completely different universe where Capture One is the only tool that is in use, and it's a perfect fit for the needs that universe has, and it's the universe that I want to belong into. And it is our strong belief that one of our obligations, one of our mandates is, photography is an incredibly challenging career as it is, and if you don't have the right tools at your disposal from the get-go, that doesn't make it any easier. So we want to put these tools in the hands of photographers very, very early. So as soon as someone has an inkling that they will, they will pivot, an interest, an enthusiastic interest in photography into a form of income, that's the moment when Capture One has to intersect with them.
So quickly, I'd love to go back to the iPad, iPhone quick point there. Personally, at the high end, I don't know. I don't see, me and you have talked about this. I don't see how many high-end people are going to be using the iPhone. Three, 4 reasons, really. Number one, I need to shoot behind-the-scenes video and like little pictures, chuck my phone around to my assistants, going, oh, can you just grab a couple of shots of me shooting? If I'm shooting to an iPhone, that completely knocks that device out from being usable. Number two, I'll probably get a phone call, have to check my emails, have to WhatsApp someone on the sly, and then again, the iPhone's out of options. But then quickly, the screen's not big enough, etc., etc. But I can totally see how it would be useful if you are just one guy going out on your own with a model and you're trying to shoot something really quickly, really easily, and get a bigger preview than the back of the screen. I don't like the backs of screens. I don't really like EVFs. I do just love being able to see what the actual RAW file looks like.
Or firing it out to iPhones for clients and stuff. Firing it out, being able to fire it out to multiple iPhones, which is obviously something you can do with Capture Pilot currently.
Well, also, I want to talk about Capture One Live. So Capture One Live, I think, has been one of the most useful things you guys have ever brought into the software. For anyone who hasn't used it or doesn't know it or is on an older version, Capture One Live is basically instantly, as a shot is being shot, a low-res, or actually relatively high-res image is then uploaded to the cloud server, and you are able to distribute a password-protected or a non-password protected link out to anyone. So anyone with a browser can dial in and watch the shoot coming through live straight into there. And then you are able to allow people to rate images, color tag images, provide comments, feedback, stuff like that. And those ratings and color feedback then integrate back into Capture One. So if you've got a client who's watching a shoot coming in, I did this with a job that I shot for an agency in New York. They dialed in at 5 a.m. and they were able to rate images as I shot because we were on such a tight deadline. I was then able to send an image to retouch about 3 or 4 hours after the shoot ended because they'd already made their selects as we were shooting.
Yeah, it is absolutely incredible.
And it's very, very well implemented as far as there's a couple of things from a usability point of view that I think I know that can be tweaked, like the rating. It would be nicer to have it where the thumb is on the iPad and stuff like that. But I shot a job for Channel 4 the other week, shooting to the iPad, and one of the commissioners was unable to make it onto the shoot. So I shot to the iPad, which then broadcast it straight away live up to a link, and she was watching from her house up in the north. and just watching the images come through. And so then she was kind of on the phone to us being like, oh, actually, quickly, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And it was almost like she was there. And I personally find that a super, super useful, because I was a bit skeptical about it when it first came out. I was just like, I was, to get really nerdy, I was already doing that with NG Rock.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, right. So I won't go into why that's ultra techie, but it's quite techie. But the Capture One Live is very seamless. It also is completely straightforward. People understand when you send them a link, they just enter the password or they can go straight into the session. From people who aren't used to using Capture One, there's no gubbins around it. It's not confusing for them. It is literally the images and a rating system. It couldn't be more simple for them. And that's ideal.
Yeah.
Well, do you have after the show, we'll try and get some links actually, Raphael, because I know that Capture One are brilliant at putting out tutorial videos and all of these things. So if anyone hasn't used this, then we will have a link to one of your kind of videos about it in the show notes, or if you're watching on YouTube, it'll be in the comments below. For me, that's very quickly, that's a real bonus for using Capture One as someone who's kind of come from, using a different platform for many, many years. And I've used Capture One for about 7 years now, and I was first brought onto it by a digi, an assistant of mine on set, and I kind of dipped in and out, partly because of the way I shoot and what the stuff that I was shooting, and the volume of images over multiple days tended to work better in a different format than using sessions, etc. And I was always a bit confused with the session catalog difference and what have you. But if you want to kind of get to the bottom of all of this stuff, there is such a plethora of videos and tutorials, and your central knowledge hub on Capture One's website is just amazing for getting to the bottom of anything. And that is so powerful, to be able to access those. If you want to sit down and get to grips with these features, there's bound to be a video on it that you guys have done, and they're always executed really well.
Yeah. Our YouTube channel is such a rich source of insight about Capture One and photography in general. And also, one of the fascinating things about Capture One is that we have all of these customer-led communities. There's a subreddit about Capture One. There's a number of Facebook groups, including groups that have tens of thousands of members, like the ones that Walter Rowe leads on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very, very rich source of information about Capture One, both on our own channels, but also the community channels, which is it's also one of the great pleasures about leading Capture One, is that we're a brand that has a community. It has a following.
I think we should also quickly shout out to David Grover, who is your YouTube guy and who runs through all the tutorials and has got a very nice manner about him and presents it all in a very, very easy to follow, straightforward, not overly complicated way. So if you haven't checked out those videos, obviously, like Greg says, go and check them out.
Everyone loves David.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, big fan. Now listen, Raphael, another elephant coming from me, I'm afraid. Let's talk about subscriptions.
Okay.
Yeah, you happy to talk about that?
I'm very happy to talk about it. Yeah.
I'm basically playing devil's advocate, right? Because obviously, I'm a massive fan of Capture One, but I also have to kind of deal with the issues that people talk to me all about the time. Now, I will preface this by saying that since I started using Capture One, I was always a perpetual license holder, and I always have just had a perpetual license. Now, I swapped. I became a subscription. Well, I don't know what you would refer to. I was a subscriber, right? Now, it then made financial sense because you have bought in Capture One Live. Now, for those who don't know, Capture One Live is free in the basic version, and I think you can have. Is it one
session live? Yeah,
one session live, and there's limitations on it. But if you are not using it very much, or if at all, that might be an option for you. But I was using it a lot, so I was paying the monthly fee for that, as well as the perpetual license, because I like to be up to date with the features. And then I started using the iPad app as well, and then obviously that was a subscription as well. And then I started doing the sums, and I was like, oh, actually, the subscription is actually quite good value. If you're upgrading every year to 18 months on a perpetual license and then using Live and then maybe using the iPad app, the subscription actually then makes financial sense from my side to do it. I know people haven't been massively happy about how it's been handled, the swap to subscription, but I would imagine, you mentioned this earlier, the reason you move to subscription, I mean, obviously you still offer the perpetual license, but the main reason for moving to subscription is basically making the company in a good place financially, but being able to constantly improve the software. Because I think people maybe don't quite understand how expensive running a software company is. And so obviously if you're then only getting perpetual licenses and some people are holding on to them for 6-7 years, well, then that's kind of dead weight, because then you're not then able to innovate. You're not then able to bring in new features and stuff like that. So can you just run me through the process? Is that basically why the kind of the big push to subscription has happened?
So our pricing architecture, if you think broadly about pricing and our vision for pricing, in many ways it responds to the same way how we think about building our software. So it starts with what do people want? What do customers want? And the reality is that the vast majority of the new customers that we acquire are choosing a subscription package, and that is something that I think is as much a function of industry trends and consumer preference and consumer behavior than anything else. Mm-hmm. And as we were thinking about our pricing, the other couple of things that we wanted to do were, number one, give our customers the choice. So we didn't want to go down the path of saying, look, we're only going to do subscriptions if we still have a significant constituency of customers who would prefer to have a perpetual license. So we recognized, look, let's start by giving our customers choice. And then the other thing that we wanted to do was to, fulfill our desire and our vision to build software in very rapid ways and, ship things continuously and, continuously be innovating and listening to customers and making Capture One better and making photography better for our customers. So we also decided, look, the best way to do that is to eliminate the idea that we need to have this big tentpole event towards the end of every year where we do a big major release that around this time of year would be called Capture One 24. So we're not going to do that anymore, and in fact we're going to strip out the 23 and it's just going to be Capture One, and we will continue to release software on a continuous basis. And sometimes the releases will be bigger, sometimes the releases will be smaller. But in any event, they won't be tied to a fixed 12-month schedule and create some kind of perverse incentive for us to have products and features and tools that are ready and that would be useful for our customers, but then we hold on to them until the end of the year to create this circus around the big release. And then the final thing is we also asked ourselves, so what is something innovative and different that we could bring to the market that could also answer some of the questions that our customers have about our pricing, which is why we decided to introduce what we internally call the off-ramp, which means that if you have been a subscriber for a number of years, you get quite a significant discount all the way down to 100% discount on off-ramping onto a perpetual license at the point at which you decide that you don't want to subscribe anymore to Capture One. And we think that, again, that responds to our design philosophy around giving customers flexibility. So from my perspective, it is, and this is, the company Capture One, we believe that the best way to use Capture One is having an all-in-one subscription. Mm-hmm. Because it gives you access to all of the tools. It gives you, the flexibility, and you get all of the updates and the latest things that we're building. And then, if your circumstances change, or if for any reason you decide, what, I'm actually going to, maybe you stop doing photography, or you decide to use other software, or you're no longer doing photography as a business professionally, then you off-ramp onto a perpetual license, and that will be a snapshot of the application that you are using, and you have access to your full library of a photography, whether it's in sessions or catalogs. So that's our philosophy. We want to give customers flexibility and choice. So we don't, we're not planning to eliminate the license. It's still part of our offer, and we created this off-ramp mechanism for a subscription, and the majority of our customers choose a subscription anyway, and it creates the right dynamics. It creates a very, very healthy development life cycle for Capture One, which we think is incredibly beneficial to our customers.
See, I think that's going to be really interesting for a lot of people to hear, because obviously, we're being pinched now left, right, and centre for money. Obviously, cost of living. Our fees don't tend to seem to be going up at all. Obviously, a lot of people had a very tough year this year. But I think that's good for people to hear as well. It's reassuring, and I think also the value for money in the subscription, I think quite happily justifies the cost of it, especially for someone who spends so much time in it and with all the extras. And if you're thinking maybe, the subscription is quite expensive, well, actually maybe try utilizing more of the offerings within the subscription, because then obviously the more and more you use, the better value it technically becomes. And I personally feel for me that it's working out really well, and I'm really thrilled. So I think, Greg, you have a question coming up.
Well, yeah, I was interested to see, obviously you've had a lot of these meetings recently with photographers and you've been given feedback. I don't know if you've come away from that with any kind of thoughts on features you want to start exploring, or things that you might be looking to bring in the future, or changes that you've decided, to make. Obviously, there's going to be stuff that you are working on and don't want to disclose, but is there anything that you can give us, any clues or hints or tips, a bit of insight into what your thoughts are, kind of coming away and looking at the future of Capture One and having spoken to so many users?
Yeah. So there's at least 4 themes that I think that if we make these themes true, a lot of our customers will feel that we're listening to them. So the first one that we have covered is reliability and speed. Anything that we can do to take greater advantage of the incredibly powerful computer architectures that are available today, particularly when we're talking about the Apple chipset, we will continue to do that. And we're optimizing the code in our image pipeline, but also importing and exporting, because we know that when people operate commercially, operate with teams, there's a lot of activity, and the faster that activity happens, and the faster you can get to the endpoint and close off the project, the better. And also reliability in the sense of when you fire it up, when you connect to the tether cable, it just works. And in the occasion that there's a bit of a mishap, there's a pinch, the tether cable comes out, recover really gracefully. So that whole area of bulletproof reliability, I don't think we can ever go wrong if we deliver on that. Secondly, of course, as I was talking about, the different technology waves that change industries, AI is of course the thing that is happening right now. And we have brought AI models and AI tools into a bunch of different tools, and we have been working in the last few months on AI masking, which we're going to release very, very soon. And we think it's going to be incredibly powerful and incredibly helpful for many of the folks that use Capture One, because number one, it just helps with efficiency, and it also makes their editing process, it makes their masking much more precise as well. We're really, really excited about that. The third theme is, now that we have multiple devices in play, one of the big questions that we have is, how do we reconcile the work that is being done across these multiple devices? And right now we have a fairly early implementation of how you can move files and how you can move work between devices. but we're very, very conscious that we need to advance on that respect. And so that's going to take us a few months. We've been playing around with a few things. We have a beta of a product that we call Sync out there, but we have a ton of work to do there. And then the final thing that I wanted to touch on is how we think about in-studio collaboration. Because we of course have Capture One Pro and we have Capture Pilot. Capture Pilot is an app that was developed a number of years ago. And one of the things that we constantly hear from our customers is when we are in the middle of a photo shoot, when we need to have multiple people looking at screens, and there needs to be some kind of centralized control over what each screen is showing, because you have the person who's in control of the brain, quite typically the Digitech, but it could also be the photographer themselves. But then you have clients and models and stylists, and you need to be able to curate what each one of these roles are seeing across the studio. So that's a theme that we will be looking at over a slightly longer time frame. But those are like the 4 things that I would say you can be expecting from us. Like some, as soon as our next release, and some other things that we have learned along the way and that we're very determined to continue fixing and continue delivering great tools for photographers and their teams.
I think for me personally, obviously we had we were on Zoom for hours the other day. It was a very nice chat. But obviously you've come on and done this, which I don't know any other software CEO who's happy to come on and be grilled effectively. I feel maybe I've been a bit harsh, but I apologies if I have. But it's all for driving it forward, right? And I feel very reassured that you are happy to come on, you're happy to listen, you're happy to meet with us, you're happy to take the time to to actually listen to your user base, and as a direct result change things, move things around. It's very reassuring for me professionally. I live inside Capture One for most of my post work, so it's a very reassuring thing. So thank you ever so much for doing it. We really appreciate it.
Thank you on behalf of the whole of the team, because look, this is what we live passionately to do, which is to make sure that the folks for whom Capture One is the backbone of the work that they do, that they continue to trust us. And if I reconnect with something that I said earlier on, one of the main drivers of success for our business in the future for Capture One is going to be the advocacy of folks like the two of you, because there will be someone who's aspiring to be, Tom Barnes, or who's aspiring to be Greg Funnell, and they will reach out to you through social media, and you might have some, might be mentoring them, or you might have, workshops, and it's incredibly important for us that when it comes to the conversation about, here's the way how I do my work, that Capture One, just as every other tool, is presented in a great light, and that's what we live for here in Capture One, is to make sure that our tool, as part of the whole ecosystem of tools that you use, is one of the things that you want to talk about.
No, well, it's. I mean, I feel much calmer about the kind of the future a little bit. I kind of, as a few of us had felt that we thought maybe all Capture One was dumbing down, but actually I now feel it's very much the opposite. And I understand you have to cast a broad net, you have to bring in features that will bring new people into the ecosystem. I totally understand that. And if people are moaning about that, well, I would much rather you survive as a company and survive as a piece of software, because I rely on you so heavily. Because for me personally, I don't consider there to be another option. So I would much rather have someone like yourself in charge, who is open to listening to us, open to change, and yeah, hopefully, long may that continue.
Yeah, and one of the things that I have noticed from speaking to many folks like yourselves is that in the photography industry, I think a lot of the people who are established, who have achieved a certain degree of success, are very conscious of how hard the path to that point is. So there's a certain, I've observed a certain generosity towards the next generation, and that is one thing that I would really love to harness, is how do we give the next generation the tools, because that, it doesn't guarantee success, but if a talented photographer has a great creative point of view, and they have the work ethics, and they have the right tools, they will need a little bit of luck, and none of us can solve that, but at a minimum, we can say, look, these are the right tools, and give people access to them. And it's something that I care passionately about, because to some extent it is really the story of my life. I'm just a kid from Venezuela who had access to incredible technology, and that opened a window to the world and to a career, and I think that it's incredibly important that in industries like photography, that we're constantly thinking about, hey, how do we pay forward to the next generation of folks, so that they can continue to push the boundaries of this industry. And it's something that I constantly talk to the team about, is, look, photography has existed for a couple hundred years. The tools around photography are unrecognizable relative to what the daguerreotype was. Mm-hmm. But that human need to express through the still image, it's still there. And I think it's incredibly important that we perpetuate the ability of humanity to express itself that way.
Well, that's a nice thing. Yeah, that's great. I think, why don't we, that just sounds like a really nice spot there to kind of just start wrapping this up. I think for me personally, massive thanks for coming on and for taking the time to listen to us and hear our thoughts.
Pleasure, Tom.
So we have a couple of things that we do at the end of each show. Now, listen quickly. I know you know what's coming because you've listened to the show. Yes. You told us before, and you told me the other day that you actually listened to quite a surprising amount of the episodes. So apologies, for that. But thank you very much for taking the time to listen to the show. I don't actually, though, Raphael, I don't see you in our Patreon list. So we'll have words with that.
I'll have to. I have to confess that I discovered the Patreon this morning.
There we go. No, honestly, it's really great to hear that you A, listen to the show, B, you enjoy it. Hopefully, you didn't actually say that part of it.
Yeah, didn't say that.
I enjoy it, and also I learn a lot, because I'm a newcomer to the industry, so it's just given me incredible insights about your life, about the industry in general, about the different players in the industry, and that is incredibly helpful for me, and learning is one of the things that I enjoy the most.
Oh, that's great. That is why we did it. We just thought, you talk about paying things forward to the younger generation. Again, that's kind of one of the reasons we wanted to run this as a podcast. We wanted to try and help people. We we understand that photography is a very closed book, and I can only imagine as a software company not looking in, because obviously you are a very integral part of the industry, but unless you are getting people reaching out to you, it must be quite hard to just gauge how everything is. So, and we know that is the same for people who are maybe just starting out, or just, they want to kind of advance their career to the next level. And me and Greg have been doing this, probably almost 50 years between us. So there's a lot of experience there. So hopefully we, will, long may this continue. So that's the plan.
Amazing.
So, did we brief you about this? Did this come in the email? I can't even remember. If you've listened to the show, you probably know what's coming.
I think I know what's coming from listening to the show, but you didn't brief me.
So we ask all our guests. Actually, Greg, I've talked a lot. Can you take over?
Okay, Raphael. Thank you for coming on again. I just want to reiterate that we're now sending you to a desert island. I'm sorry. on that desert island, obviously you get to choose your desert island camera and your desert island photo book. So what would be the things that you take with you if you're going to be jettisoned?
Yes. So firstly, I lived in the UK long enough to know what desert island discs is. It is one of my favorite.
Nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that.
Sorry, it's literally nothing. Raphael, for copyright reasons, we have to say that it is a completely unrelated thing.
Okay. But at least the vague reference rings a bell.
Yeah.
There we go. Good.
So my photography life in some ways started with Capture One. Like, prior to Capture One, I was, someone who would take snaps of my family in a social way, but I really started to learn about photography here. And I'm actually using the Fujifilm X-T4 for this, to record this podcast, and it's the first like proper camera that I've had, and I've learned a lot with it. It can be sometimes a little bit bewildering and a little bit inconsistent, but I think that is one of the things that I really love about it, is that it has really forced me to like get drawn into the process and to experiment and to play with it. And as someone who's a self-professed nerd, it's really like piqued my interest in photography. So I bought it when I got the job at Capture One, and I think it's going to stay with me for a very long time because it has a lot of meaning for me in that respect.
That makes me very happy that you're a Fujifilm user, actually.
Excellent. Yeah, we're heading to Fujikina next week in Stockholm, which should be a fun event.
Oh, wow.
I will send you some photos from there.
Please do.
And then in terms of photo books, I will refer to a book that was published by a Venezuelan business family called the Fulmer family. It is called Los Rostros del Venezolano, which means the faces of Venezuelans. And it has a lot of meaning for me because I grew up in Venezuela, an incredibly rich and diverse country by many descriptions, and unfortunately a country that the luck of the country has been terrible in the last 20 years or so. But I carry this book with me as a reminder of where I come from and the very, very formative experiences of my upbringing. And again, it's just an incredible reminder for me about, I have worked incredibly hard and I've been incredibly lucky in my career, and it's incredibly important that I remain attached to that as a source of motivation and focus for me.
Nice,
that's cool. We'll put a link to that in the show notes and in the comments below. So if people want to see that book, they can check that out.
Super.
Perfect. Well,
that's
listen,
a really nice place to end as well, though, because just very quickly, what's nice about that is you've highlighted there, and I know you've said this already, but you've highlighted there the power of photography, because the power of the still image to actually kind of make us think and have an emotional reaction to something that is literally sat there on a page. It's a very simple art. It's a very simple medium in some ways, but it's also immensely powerful and immensely complicated at the same time. And the fact that you can feel that from a book of work, from a book of images, is what's so amazing and what we love about it. So that's a really nice little place to end it.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming on, Tom. I mean, I know that myself and Tom have been really excited about this episode, and I'm sure we will be talking to you again. And I know that our listeners are going to be excited to, hear what you've talked about on the show, and excited about the things that you're focusing on, and really just reassured. Because, as Tom said, that's for a lot of photographers. There's always this fear in the back of their mind when they've got to, as Tom was saying, with the decades of work that we've both got under our belt, looking back, going, "Oh God, I hope that catalogue or that session or that thing that I've made is still going to be accessible in another 10 years, another 20 years time." So, to hear that you're kind of working on that and have that in your mind as well is really important.
Yeah.
So thank you.
No, I appreciate the time, and look forward to reconnecting again soon.
Absolutely. Quick one. For people who don't know Capture One, it is capture1.com, right? And so people can find all the information that we've been talking about on that website. And then I would imagine it's youtube.com/@capture1. And that's where all the people's videos are, or David Grover's videos, and all the kind of the walkthroughs of the tech and stuff like that. Is there anything else people should be able to check out? Or I mean, that pretty much covers it, right?
No, that covers it. Those are of course, we also have an Instagram handle, which is fantastic. But yeah, like those are the three main places to go to.
Brilliant. Okay, perfect. Well, listen, Raphael, what an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. I feel very good about all this. So, I hope everyone listening does too. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. And look, if there's any questions that come through from your audience later on and you want to channel them our way, we will be very, very happy to spend time with folks, just answering questions or any help that we can give them.
Sure. If people want to do that, it's info@exposednegative.com, and we'll make sure they land in the right place.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening to the latest episode of the Exposed Negative podcast. If you'd like to support the show, you can do that by heading to our Patreon or doing one-offs. The details are on the website, and the Patreon is patreon.com/exposed negative. We'd love it if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@exposed negative. And obviously, we're on Instagram, which is xnegative. If you want to follow us personally, mine is tombarnes.com on Instagram. And the website. And then Greg's is @GregFennell, and that's FUNNELL. So, thank you very much for taking the time to listen, and hopefully you enjoy the next one.